Good morning. This is Wednesday, July 11th, 2007. I'm Lee Cook, and we're pleased today to have with us ex-President Franz, the fourth President of the University of Alabama in Huntsville. Thank you for being here today, Frank.
My pleasure.
What we're going to do today, Frank, is try and take you through your life, get some comments, some insights into your various activities that you've had. So maybe we'll just start from the beginning, your early life, say through college, and I've always wanted to ask, why physics?
Oh my. Well, I grew up in Philadelphia, was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At about the grade of 4, I decided I didn't want to have a Philadelphia accent. So I worked very hard as a young kid not to acquire a Philadelphia accent, so you've never known where I'm from. But I was born in Philadelphia, went through the Philadelphia schools, and developed an interest in science really at an early age. At Philadelphia, they have something that's, of course, the progenitor, really, of some of the things that go on here in Huntsville in terms of hands-on science. It's called the Franklin Institute. And you could go there and you could do hands-on science as a kid with all kinds of demonstrations, and that was where we went. And also, they have a lot of other museums, a Museum of Archaeology, which I was very much interested in, too. So the idea of a city having a lot to offer was very important. I grew up in a very old when I was a kid, row house. They're not known in Alabama, but the row houses, you have maybe 30 of them. They share 2 walls, and of course they have the front and the back free, but you share those walls. That house was so old, there was still gas that was in it, not only for cooking, but had been in there originally for illumination, which meant there were gas outlets in the basement. So I was the only kid in school who had a Bunsen burner with his chemistry set. So that was pretty neat. So I liked that. But I went through high school. We moved out to the suburbs in my junior year. And that was I grew up in southwest Philadelphia, but the suburbs were just outside, and we moved out there. And so I graduated from a suburban high school, which in fact is where I met my wife, Judy, who was also interested in science and mathematics. And we were enemies in high school, kind of, but always competing, right? But after we graduated, we realized maybe there was something else going on, too. And so we dated throughout college. She went to Cornell, and I went to a school in Pennsylvania called Lafayette College.
Were your parents, just a minute, were your parents scientists or that way?
Oh, no.
Did you come from them?
No, not at all, not at all. It was just an instinct, and I enjoyed something I acquired. No, they were both very bright, but they had really gotten married and had kids during the Depression. And so they didn't have the opportunities that we had. All of my family, I and my brother and sister, who were both younger, went to college. But I'm the only one who wound up in science. But Judy's family, on the other hand, both of her parents were PhDs in chemistry, and both of them taught at Drexel University. So she had a really good science background. But it was just the interest that I had. I always enjoyed solving things, whether they were science problems or, as we'll talk about a little bit later, university problems. And I think it's a great satisfaction, as you, Lee, have done yourself in your career here, to encounter a difficult problem and maybe to see a model or a solution that you can work out for the benefit of solving it. So after college, I worked as a bellhop for 2 years at the seashore when I was in high school. I think we were probably breaking the age laws at that time, but that was an interesting experience.
That wasn't too bad a job.
It made me realize I wanted to go on into science, I think. And so I had several jobs at the electric company, at the oil company and whatnot that were more science related while I was in college. Graduated from Lafayette College, and then in that summer, my wife and I were married, and we went to the University of Illinois, which was a great experience for us. We were both TAs, teaching assistants in the physics department, and at that time, and still, Illinois was one of the top 10 schools in physics. Very competitive, and it was a little sink or swim for the first year or so, that's for sure. But enjoyed Illinois very, very much, and it was a faculty there, which is much like the faculty at UAH. It got engaged with the students. We actually talked to our professors out of class, and there was a coffee room where a number of us would congregate at various times, students and faculty members as well. And so I think I owe an awful lot to encouragement and stimulation, both in physics, but also in community service and things of that sort, university service. They were very much interested in how the university worked, and I've maintained that, of course, throughout my career. So and of course got a PhD in physics. And then both of us went over to Switzerland for 2 years as postdocs. Judy at the IBM Research Laboratory in Ruschlikon, and I was at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule in Zurich. And our son was born in Zurich.
Okay, so after you had finished your postdoc, what happened then?
Well, it was an interesting time. That was 1967. And we were very fortunate because we had possibilities to go to a number of places, interviews and whatnot at a number of schools. The next year, those possibilities fell off the cliff. And I had a good friend who was in Germany who had stayed an extra year. And he had a very tough time finding a place to alight. Whereas we were very fortunate. Indiana was growing at the time, an excellent university. They were building their physics department. And so we were very, very fortunate. We arrived at the right time. And they were also a school that had no nepotism laws. At the time, nepotism laws were still okay in certain areas. For example, we were looking very strongly at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, but they had a nepotism law, and they couldn't hire both of us. So that made it easy to choose Indiana, and we had just a great time at Indiana, professionally and every other way.
And we had nepotism laws here at UAH for many years.
Did you? Yeah.
But they're gone now.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
So we're now at Indiana. You're teaching, doing research, and Judy is doing the same. What happens then? You're there maybe, 10, 12 years or so, and you took a dark side, you went to the dark turn?
The dark side over to the administration. But it was a curious way of getting there. At Indiana also we had very much a participatory university. By that I mean that the administrators almost always came from the existing faculty, so that you'd have people moving into the administration and moving out of it. The chancellor of the campus came from the faculty and then moved moved into administration, I should say. So the way it happened was a curious thing. You remember that there were some riots and some things like that. I remember 67. This was a long time ago.
Yes.
But in the early 70s, et cetera, there were some demonstrations. I wouldn't say riots. There were no riots at Indiana, but there were demonstrations. Yeah. There were demonstrations, and there was a lot of concern about the Vietnam War and whatnot. The campus suffered a lockout, or a sit-in, I should say, in the administration building. And there were some other activities, marches and things of the sort. And then there was a strike. And so the students did go out on strike for about 2 weeks. But then we all wanted to put it, because I was a young assistant professor, but the administration wanted to put it together, some sort of an amnesty, et cetera. And so I guess I must have been viewed as the most conservative of the liberals, or the most liberal of the conservatives, I'm not sure which, as a young assistant professor. And one of the vice presidents called up and asked if I would serve as an ombudsman for the campus for about a 4-week period. And I didn't really want to take time out from research to do that, but I thought, this will be an interesting thing to do. So, in fact, I did that. And many problems came to me. And Lee, you understand a lot of things involving mathematics and other places like that. But professors who maybe wanted to have encouragement to be able to allow a little bit more flexibility, or some students who wanted to expect a little more flexibility than was being given. So I did that, and it's kind of fun. But then I guess I was targeted for doing other things. And at Indiana, we had a tradition that the administrators that I spoke of all were half-time, which means you were really double time. You were doing your own disciplinary job, and you were doing the administration as well. But there was a very strong sentiment for faculty participation in university governance and faculty moving into the administrative positions. So then I was asked to serve as Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. The College of Arts and Sciences at Indiana is substantially larger than our whole university, about 3 times as large, very, very big. And I didn't want to do that, and I said no several times, but finally I got sucked into doing that and served there for 3 years, and then went back to the faculty, but then got nominated for what they call there the Dean of the Faculties, which is really the Chief Academic Officer, almost the Provost, not exactly a Provost, but Chief Academic Officer. And I did that for 5 years. So 8 years really in part-time administration. When I was back with the faculty that time, we still had research grants, but I was probably a better administrator by that time than I was a faculty member. And so there were a number of universities that came calling. And finally, the one that I thought would fit was West Virginia. So we went to, they had the same kinds of problems. Oh, I should say that I've always been involved with problem solving. And the reason I finally took the position that I took as Dean of Faculties at Indiana was that the university was planning for an enrollment decline. And they were about to cut budgets for an enrollment decline. And some of us, and certainly I was, I guess, prominent among them, said, this is nuts, this is crazy. Indiana doesn't have to suffer an enrollment decline. We can recoup that. We can do this better. And I had some very definite ideas about how we ought to do that. And so that's probably a little bit the reason. The person who hired me at Indiana was Robert O'Neill, who later became the president of the University of Wisconsin and the president of the University of Virginia. And I sat with him and told him everything that was going wrong. And I wanted to lay it out. That was the reason I went in for the interview. And I thought, well, that's fine. But then he came knocking on my door a day or so later and said, you'll do the job. And it was fun to do because there were things that we could do to improve the situation. And I went into some detail with that because that was involving enrollment. At West Virginia, it was involving enrollment. They had had a situation where they had planning for the future, and they had cut the enrollments. But of course, what they did was they cut the resources when they cut the enrollments, and they had plunged by about 5,000 students from 23,000 to about 18,000.
Yes, there were some demographic trends there. I think we're pushing that. Everyone was expecting that, weren't they?
Well, no, they didn't need to. Yes, they didn't need to. In any case, at Indiana, we rebuilt the enrollment. At West Virginia, we rebuilt the enrollment. And, of course, that's been one of the prime things we've done at UAH is we've built the full-time enrollment of the university. Now,
you were the provost, vice president,
yes, at West Virginia.
I would think that the West Virginia University would be considerably different than Indiana University in terms of managing, in terms of resources.
Sure. It was a highly deprived university. Yeah. The salaries are very low there. They still are. It's a wonderful university. It has a lot of spirit, an awful lot of similarities between West Virginia in some ways, especially in state government in Alabama, which we noticed. But no, it was the people who go there really love the university. One of the items that I think is very similar among the 3 universities, UAH, West Virginia, and Indiana, is the dedication of the faculty and staff. People really, you were a prime example of that. People come and they stay and they contribute and they make sacrifice and they love the university. And that was true at all 3, has been true at all 3 places. But the key for me in all of these 3 things was to see a situation that I knew there was a solution to. I knew what the solution was, or multiple solutions, and to convince people that we should implement them. And it's been successful.
Tell us a little bit about the search project that brought you to UAH. Any interesting stories?
Oh, sure. The Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the system level, I had gotten to know him through a group of provosts and chief academic officers, etc., for a thing called NASOLGIC, that's the National Association of State Universities and Land-Grant Colleges. Very, very good organization, and really at that time an extremely active group of chief academic officers. So we had thrashed out problems there too. And he kept calling me, asking me to give my veto for Alabama Huntsville. And I didn't want to do it. I mean, we were enmeshed in a enormous battle at West Virginia. The governor, the head of the state legislature, both houses, heads, wanted to remove the medical school from West Virginia University and combine it with something, a much, much smaller thing at Marshall University. And we thought that that would destroy the university. So it was a pitched battle. The president of the university, Neil Bucklew, of course, that was the guy that I reported to directly, was very involved in fighting that, and so was I. And so we were fighting really against all of state government. I mean, it was quite, but of course we had a very strong alumni association and very strong friends in the West Virginia power structure. On the last day that you could send a vita to UAH, my friend called me again and said, please fax me your vita. And it was a particularly dark day for the future at that time, and I thought, okay, I'll send the vita down. And I did, and of course then it turned out that I was among the final group. And then when I came to Alabama, I didn't have a clue at that time about the strengths of Alabama. I went through the civil rights era, had a rather dismal picture of Alabama. But when I came, and I visited all over the state, the then Secretary of the Board of Trustees, John Hicks, flew me or drove me all over the state to meet the trustees, and especially saw Birmingham and, of course, Huntsville, and really understood it was a neat place. It was very, very different from what my expectation had been. And, of course, nothing has disabused me of that. It's been a wonderful experience. The dedication of the people of the state is extraordinary. And we've come through tough times. We'll probably talk about those here at UAH. But no, let me put it this way. When I went back to Morgantown, West Virginia, of course, everybody was very much interested in, well, what'd you think? What'd you think? And I said, oh, what about the race relations? I said, they do it better in Alabama than we do it up here. And that was really true, and it's been true, and we've had a great association with, for example, here, UAH and Alabama A&M University, once we got out of that court case, and even during it. So it's, yeah, it was by a big chance that I wound up here. It wasn't meaning to come down, wasn't seeking the position, but it worked out that, in fact, I was invited to come.
Was that Lane Rollins at the time?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, Lane.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, all right. So you say, okay, I'm going to do this. You're offered the job. Came in here in the summer of '91, I believe.
July.
And UAH had been through a pretty rough patch. So here you are. You see a lot of problems. What's the first thing you're going to do when you hit the campus besides, of course, talk to people?
Oh, well, there were a bunch of things we did, and you will remember that pretty well. Of course, I was in correspondence with people at the university and had visited the university numerous times before I came in July. I think I was appointed someplace back in March or April, and then came to the university on a regular basis after that. So I had a very good idea of what the problems were. And of course, one of them was a budget that had spun woefully out of balance. The first iteration of the budget that I had, which of course I was very much interested in what was going on and how they were being constructed, was about $5 million out of balance. And then when it got cut back somewhat, it was about $3 million out of balance. That was the operating budget. Chuck Lundquist, I'm seeing sitting there, of course, was a colleague in the research administration, and we had to work all together, not just the academic side, but the research side, and make cuts. Not only was the operating budget out of balance by about that much, but I later realized, not much later, but say a couple months, that the reserves were also out of balance, which means that there were more projected commitments on them than there were resources to cover them. So, and let me put it this way, if a state university can be bankrupt, we were close to being bankrupt. I think that you will recall, and Chuck will recall, that just before I got here, the university had to borrow money from a sister university in order to meet the payroll. It was that bad. So what I did was, first of all, to get the budget into balance. And so, for example, any commitment that somebody had that wasn't in writing was not a commitment. and that's pretty gross, but I mean, we had to do that sort of a thing. We made cuts, we made reallocations, we changed the distribution of some of the money sent back to various departments and individuals, but we got the budget in balance. Of course, there were no raises that year. It was a tough time. It was a very tough time. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I wrote to the faculty and I laid out some suggestions about how we might proceed, and we discussed those things within the faculty. I ought to say, before I forget to do this, that one of the things we were really blessed with, we meaning the university, is we've had strong leadership in the faculty senate and the staff senate. There's not been a confrontational kind of an operation as it is in some universities, very much working together. And so we've been very fortunate to have that kind of leadership. We had good leadership in the deans and the vice presidents. So we climbed out of it. Of course, again, our goal was to build the enrollment. It looked like we had a good enrollment. We had over 8,000 students at that time. We have less than that now. 1,700 of those were space campers taking one credit one time. And so we're out of that now. We have none of those in our enrollment figures. And the students who are now here are essentially full-time students. Over 85% of our instruction at the undergraduate level now is given to full-time students. And they, of course, we'll talk later, they come from all over. And that was one of the primary goals. So I think that the key thing was to work with the faculty and the staff and the administration and to have a plan. I did put out a very, very specific plan, have it commented upon. We changed it as necessary. But I think people had hope and saw that there was a way to resolve the problems and were willing to commit themselves to it. Almost everybody. Of course, there were always a few who maybe had a different idea, but almost everybody.
The balancing of the budget took several years.
Yes.
It was not overnight, and things were tough. What did you see after the first victory of balancing the budget, but what was the first, if you will, positive thing that you felt you had accomplished after the budget balancing?
Well, but it was tied really to making the. Let me say that the goal I had of coming, and that was just not a budget balancing issue, but was to make UAH a more traditional university. One of the first sights I saw when I came was a group of several students sitting individually in cars studying between classes, and I thought, what an unhappy circumstance. And I thought there were ways to change that. So almost everything we've done has been to enhance the university, enhance the academic experience of students at the university, enhance the attractiveness of the university. And of course that's a little bit self-serving for us because part of our way to climb out of the mess we were in was to build the enrollment. Right. So we worked hard on that. A key thing from my perspective, and shared by many faculty, but not all, and this was probably one of the more contentious things we did. We had a modified quarter system that was in existence, pardon me, was in existence when I came. And I thought pretty strongly that that was a pressure cooker way to teach and to learn. And so I moved to the semester system. And that's something we did with a lot of discussion, a lot of debate back and forth, open forums, etc. I was very fortunate to have a couple of colleagues who were long-time members of the faculty at the university who were in the administration, Sam McManus and Carolyn White. And they played key roles in helping with this. We had some absolute opposition from some sectors. But I think that evidently, I think the university had been through the consideration of that several times before. And I remember Carolyn was unsure as to whether she was up to going through this again. But she said, yes, well, let's do it. Let's do it. And it was time. And so I think that it took a while. We knew that we would have a temporary decline in credit hours taken. But we felt that it would be so much better for the faculty, for the students, for the educational experience, for the transition to a traditional campus, that we pushed hard. And we got it, and we got it. And I think it's been extremely successful. By the way, since then, of course, UAB, which had been on a similar system, has gone to the semester system. Auburn University has also gone to the semester system.
I was going to say, you were almost pressing it. Within 5 years, Georgia Tech went to it, all the Georgia schools. So it was almost like the dam broke right about that time. And certainly my own feeling is that, yes, it was a little contentious, especially in certain areas, but it was a wonderful thing, and now it's firmly established. And of course, that's what everyone does now. They're on the semester system.
Right.
Talk a little bit. I think UAH has been very fortunate with synergy with the Army, NASA, town. Talk a little bit about your relations with those organizations, how they helped, how you stimulated them to help. Because that's the president. That's a very important job of the president.
Right. Well, we were very fortunate. We've been fortunate over the years in that Ken Harwell did a very good job as vice president for research, and Chuck Lundquist had a lot of experience having been out at Marshall and being the science director out there, and then coming to the university. So we had a strong tradition of heavy support for Marshall, and we had a lot of co-ops out at Marshall. We had people from Marshall teaching courses here. And so there was a very good synergy. I've often said that UAH would not be UAH if it was plunked down somewhere in Kansas. It is UAH because of where it's at, in Huntsville, Alabama, with the Redstone Arsenal and the Army and NASA. One of the things that we were able to accomplish in working with NASA, can I tell a story on that?
Oh, please.
Yeah, okay. Well, Dan Golden was the NASA administrator at that time. And he kept trying to take the science away from Marshall. And we had such a strong synergy with Marshall in the science. We had built our science to support them. And so that was where our jewels were, really in the science mission. Engineering, of course, but especially in a lot of the science. And it had been under threat for a long time. Golden came to the Alabama legislature to give a talk. And he challenged us to bring all of the state universities, research universities of Alabama together to preserve the science. He would let it be if we did this, basically. And I'm absolutely sure he thought there wasn't a chance in the world that we were going to do that. But we did. And that was where, in fact, I met and worked closely with Ron Greenwood, who was on the NASA side of helping pull this together. We pulled together the Global Hydrology Center, and then ultimately the National Space Science and Technology Center. And I am absolutely convinced that if we had not done that, the science at Marshall would have disappeared. And Marshall has a strong tradition in propulsion and engineering, but it also had a strong tradition in very important science, atmospheric science, for example, space physics and astrophysics, especially the astrophysics aspects. So I'm proud that we were able to do that, and I think that we kind of snuck it by. Maybe.
That was a real coup. Several of us on the faculty talked about that, how the funding materialized, and UAH didn't have to put up any money. And I have several friends over there at NSSDC. They love it. They're the NASA people.
Oh, yes.
But they think it's wonderful.
And I think everybody does. And I expect a bright future for that. In fact, when Ken Harwell decided to leave the vice presidency for research, and we were looking around for who it might be, the guy who had given me the most trouble in putting together the Global Hydrology Center, and then, the Global Hydrology Center, was Ron Greenwood. But I thought, I need him on my side, and he has been a spectacular vice president for research. I mean, he is just unexcelled anywhere in the country from my perspective. And so we of course worked very, very well together, but a lot of the credit for the existence of the NSSDC and of course originally the Global Hydrology Center was Ron's. What we've done now is in the past, about 5 years ago, we realized that the NASA was going to be flat basically in funding probably for quite a while, and there were other missions that were coming in, and we couldn't depend on NASA's support increasing. In fact, we had to look forward to the fact that it might decrease. So we have stepped up substantially, very much, our attachment to the Army. We now have UAH employees, mainly students, over at the Arsenal working for the Army in excess of 200.
That's full-time or co-ops or both?
That's part-time, full-time, co-op. Yes, it's all of the above. We've expanded our Army research dramatically. In total, the total of everything we do, which is mainly NASA and Army. Army now exceeds NASA support. Last year, the awards were $70 million. Now, it's awards. That's not the expenditures. The expenditures were about $50 million. But the awards were $70 million, which is quite good.
It's come a long way. I remember when we were shooting for $5 million. The one thing you haven't mentioned, and I know it's very important, but the town aspect, the UAH Foundation has played a major role ever since UAH's inception. Again, what were some of the things they did, and what were some of the things you went to them with initiatives to get it to help UAH?
Well, one of my greatest supporters and best friends is the chairman of the UAH Foundation. That's Ray Jones, who has dedicated an enormous amount of time and energy and insight and creativity to leading the UAH Foundation over these past few years, past many years now. And it's been an extremely important thing for the university. One of the things we suffer from in fundraising is, aside from the foundation, and I'll come back to that, we have very, very few rich alumni.
They're pretty young.
They're pretty young. But we have very few. We have perhaps 5 or 6. And some of them have been very generous to the university, as you're aware. The people in the city, most of them, other than the foundation members, but even some of the foundation members, have other charities, other alma maters that they support. And so it is very difficult. I think the former presidents and I have talked about this, and they have also seen the same thing, that this was really difficult to raise, in an eleemosynary sense, monies from donors. Now, the foundation is important. And it has been. It has been. So my primary energies have been to get the money from other sources, the federal government, the enrollment growth, things of that sort, and trying to get gifts where we can. And of course, part of the money that has built the university, we have great support from our congressional delegation, from Bud Kramer in particular, and Richard Shelby especially. The wonderful building that is going to house your old department and the biology department and all of the undergraduate science labs that will open up this fall, which is going to be called the Shelby Center for Science and Technology. That was brought about by Richard Shelby getting $50 million from the federal government and encouraging the governor to contribute 10. So that's been an extraordinary development. The NSSTC, we own that building. Bud Kramer got the money for that, well, aided by Richard Shelby. Kramer went out very aggressively to buy the money for us to expand that building, to create the laboratories, etc. So we have done extremely well.
And the National Weather Center.
Yes, yes, oh yes, absolutely.
Mr. Kramer was a bulldog on that.
And yes, he wanted to make sure the Weather Center was in there, and that's had great synergy with our atmospheric science folks. So really, where we've had great success is with the federal government, much less with the state government. But of course, the state has been in financial distress up until the past 2.5 years or so. But getting back with the foundation, one of the challenges was the foundation was originally created as, in a sense, a land development operation. It was not really tied entirely to UAH. Right. And we were able, with Mark Smith and Olin King and all the other leaders, Ray Jones, to gradually move that to that it's clearly the university's foundation. And that required a little bit of a transition because, as I say, originally it was like, well, the land might not be sold for a profit or something like that. Well, the land's always sold for a profit now to benefit the university, the land that the foundation holds. I think that Darrell Morgan, who has been the Vice President for Advancement and also the Director of the Foundation, the Executive Director of the Foundation, has done a marvelous job in husbanding resources and developing new ones in that way. But yeah, Ray Jones has just been extraordinary in his dedication to improving the lot of the university and helping us find resources. The other thing I'd say is that a lot of universities have boards of trustees where those trustees are chosen for their fund-giving ability to the university. Our trustees are for all three campuses, and we don't really have any on there that are particularly tied to giving money to the university. We have our two local trustees are generous, but we don't have multi-million-dollar gifts from the trustees to the university, and that's a difficulty. That's where you often do your best fundraising.
No coal mines. I've had a lot of luck lately with capital growth, new dorms. Of course, the Shelby Center is going to change well, every time I ride past, it just changed the face of the South Campus. It's incredible. Baseball field, softball field. What's next? I know it won't be your headache.
It won't be my headache.
But what's next on the capital?
Well, you missed one of the truly neat things.
The
fitness center.
That is a lovely.
The University Fitness Center.
Yeah. And of course your modular center. Parking deck, but I know it's not supposed to be called a parking deck.
Intermodal facility.
Yeah.
Now, but the fitness center has played a key role in the development of the university for the faculty, the staff, and the students. The students really look for a facility like that.
Yeah,
and we've been very, very fortunate, and everybody worked together to create that. One of the fun things for architects in town is that when they do something for the university, they have a lot of help. They have help from me, they have help from Ray Jones, they have help from Olin King, they have Mark Smith when he was still living, etc. They have a lot of free assistance. But I think we've wound up with some beautiful buildings. And the fitness center has been a very, very special addition. And I think an awful lot of pounds have been lost at the fitness center by faculty and staff.
When I ride by there, it's always full, especially in the late afternoon and evening.
And the building we're sitting in. Of course, we expanded the library with a marvelous new addition. And, that was one of the other things that I noticed when I was first in Huntsville, that if you drove through the campus on Holmes Avenue and you came from east to west, you didn't have a clue you were on a university campus. You would not know it. You had to really look to see, because Spraggins Hall was set far back off of the campus. There was nothing really on the south side as you came through.
Right.
But with the new library, the new part of the library, the addition to the library, the fitness center, and now, of course, you can also see the fraternities and sororities. You know you're on a college campus.
Absolutely. And, of course, we have John Wright Drive and Ben Graves. How could you miss those signs?
When we did the long-range plan, which was just a few years ago, and really laid out the opportunity to have a new entrance to the campus, which is going to be very spectacular. Some of the architects for the long-range plan had said to me, actually, they weren't. There was a hired gun to come in and do some signage. It was not the architects themselves, but a hired person to come in, and they had a lot of good suggestions. But then they said, why do you have this confusing thing where you've got John Wright Drive and Ben Graves Drive? And I said, that is one of the master strokes that your president who's talking to you came to, how to honor two colleagues who preceded. And what a neat, I still think that's a neat idea, because the northern part of the campus, of course, was mainly done under Ben. And the southern part mainly done under John, and I think they like it a lot. So we're not changing the names of those streets for sure.
If you had to look back, other than balancing the budget those first 2 or 3 years, surely that must have been your greatest challenge or immediate challenge. What would you say your next couple were? You feel very good about it.
Well, let me go back. I didn't really answer your question of what's coming next. Let me do that first. because I think that what we've set up, of course, President Williams is going to make the final decisions on anything new, but we've left the possibility open. Clearly, Wilson Hall needs total renovation, and that's an expensive project because when you go in to renovate anything like that, you have to essentially almost gut it. You have to put in new mechanical systems, new restroom facilities, handicapped accessible, etc. So it's a major issue, but we think it probably cost about $10 million. It would be very nice when the mathematics department moves out of Madison Hall, also to renovate Madison Hall. And we have plans, preliminary plans, I've left for both of those buildings. And we've also, in the budget, this present year budget, I also left a sizable amount of money that could be used for debt service for a bond issue to complete the renovation of those buildings. Now, maybe there'll be something else that will come up, and he'll have a different idea, but that's what I think that would be one of the things to look for the future. And of course, for anybody who has not been on the campus and not seen the evolution of Shelby Hall and of the entrance and the expansion of the lake, they are in for a treat when they see that. It is a spectacular
the
vista.
walls I've been watching going up there in the entrance.
Okay, now you said other things. One of the toughest things, and this was, again, something that was very important for everybody to work, almost everybody, to work together on, was after we got the budget pretty well balanced, and we'd gone through another proration by that time, actually. I didn't know before I came to Alabama that proration was a nasty word. It sounded kind of nice somehow. It's a very, very bad word, of course. Well, we had the election of Fob James. And at that time, I was also, during the 2 years of Fob's reign, I was elected as chair of the Council of Presidents. And I was going through, as I was going through my stuff at the office, there are many editorials that got written, or I wrote, that were published around the state with various cartoon things, whatnot, that were attached to them. It was kind of fun. There was a fun aspect to that in a sense. But it wasn't fun what Fob was trying to do to the university. He felt that he wanted to improve the funding to K through 12. And that was a worthy prospect. But he didn't want to attack the fact that we're the lowest tax state in the nation. We were then. We still are. We still are. And he wanted to take it away from higher education, which he felt was somehow rich. And of course, we weren't. We were as destitute as West Virginia was, where I'd come from. So he in fact, his initial budget recommendation for that year was to cut the universities across the board by 15% in appropriation. That's a huge, huge amount. And it would have devastated this university. It would have forever.
As I recall, it was not at the beginning of the year. It was into the year when he did this.
Well, it was not a proration, though. It was going to be a budget an actual appropriation reduction. No, he'd also done a proration, but the actual reduction for the coming year was to be 15%. And there's no way we could have survived a reduction like that. So I talked. This way again where Sam McManus played a key role. I talked with my vice presidents. I talked with the president of the Faculty Senate, and I proposed closing the medical center, which was then attached to us. That was the School of Primary Medical Care, and it was a fine operation, but it was the least central to our mission. And people were always saying, make hard choices. And so I thought, okay, we'll put the cards on the table and we'll try to do something. So I went down with McManus and a couple of other vice presidents to the School of Primary Medical Care, because we prepared what we were going to do. And I announced that we were going to recommend that it be closed. Well, I have to say all hell broke loose. I think that's a good way to put it. We had a vote of the Faculty Senate on this matter. The Executive Committee of the Faculty Senate endorsed the proposal unanimously. The Faculty Senate endorsed it unanimously with the exception of, I think it was 5 votes that were belonging to the School of Primary Medical Care. We went through 3 months of hell, really, with all kinds of headlines in the paper, a headline every day of all things on the television. And of course, because it was, you don't very often propose closing part of the university. But there was no question that if we didn't, and the point was we would extract some resources, that was the key, that would be able to preserve the rest of the university. Well, I won't go through much more of that, but the fact is that at the end we did arrange with UAB a financial settlement where they bought the land from us. We owned the land, they bought the land. They took over the operation. We kept the contribution that we were making to it. So we kept around $2 million in operating funds, as I recall. And we were able to reinvest those. Of course, we weren't able to hire more people with that. We avoided the budget cut.
Right.
We avoided the budget cut. But the money that we got for the land and whatnot, that went to refurbish Olin B. King Technology Hall. When we got that building, we gutted that building to create a wonderful home for most of the, half of the engineering college and computer science. We used some of the other monies later for building things on the campus. So that was a real watershed. And it was a very tough thing because I had good friends over in the SPMC that I didn't have then. But we've reestablished friendships. And in fact, it's worked out well because UAB coming in and taking over got a much more equitable share of resources from Huntsville Hospital for internships and residencies than we were getting. They were able to run the operation more efficiently than we were running it. The practice plan blossomed, and so they've got a brand new building on the land that we bequeathed to UAB. It's a vibrant enterprise, and so it survives. It just doesn't have the UH name on it. But on the other hand, we've been able to make the advances we have, especially in science and engineering, but also liberal arts, nursing and business, with the resources that we were able to preserve.
I remember the hoo-ha. I guess there was a lot of concern in the community because we were treating a lot of people there, but that's been taken over very nicely with the UAB. And
it has.
Everything worked out well.
And I would say that in this circumstance, one of the things that I continue to value is we had strong support from the newspaper, from the Huntsville Times, and the editor, Bob Ludwig, and the editorial staff. Now, there were articles that came out that kind of caught your attention. I remember one that had a headline, "Franz eats his children," was a quote of one of my colleagues down at the SPMC. But that we all took that. But the editorial support was very strong, and they said they wished the governor hadn't made the cut. But with him making the cut, and it ultimately was 7.5%, so it was a substantial cut, that they understood, and they tried to. They didn't say we support this action, but they kind of did, and it was very helpful. It was very helpful, and of course the faculty and staff on our campus were extremely supportive. It was one of those things where we pulled together and really did something very, very important.
So you come now 16 years as a president. That's a long time these days for any president. You have left the presidential office. I won't say you have retired because I know you have some things cooking, but could you share with us some of the things you're going to be doing in the next few years?
Well, certainly I would like to, if I can regain some stature as a physicist. I'd like to occasionally teach a course over in physics. I ought to make clear that I have retired. I'm going to benefit from the Alabama retirement system. I'm going to benefit from TIA, CREF.
You'll love it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. But my wife, Judy, which I didn't say what her position is presently, she continues to be a professor of physics from UAH on leave. That's been for quite a while now. But she's the executive officer of the American Physical Society, our professional society of physicists. And so she's over in Washington, and we go back and forth a whole lot. And I've really been very pleased throughout my tenure here that people have understood and in fact been very supportive of the fact that she should be able to do that, which is a very visible national position.
Yes.
And they rejoice in that, and so they've been very, very supportive. Well, we'll continue. We want to make Huntsville our home. We own our house. We'll stay in the house. We might ultimately move to a condominium or something like that. But we've also fallen in love with D.C., which has all kinds of cultural activities and wonderful restaurants and things that we've enjoyed a lot. So we have bought a condo in D.C., which is in the district. It's on M Street and 22nd. It's about 5 blocks from Georgetown, about 6 blocks from Kennedy Center, about 6 blocks from DuPont Circle, about 2.5 blocks from the Metro. It's a neat area. And so we're going to spend some time there too. But our home is going to remain in Huntsville. Yeah, I think we'll wind up having some good times over in D.C. as well.
Well, I'm sure that all the volunteer organizations will be out after you now that they know you have nothing to do.
Right. Is it true we have a cadre of retired UAH employees that have binded together? I'm teasing.
There is.
You were the organizer of that.
There is, and we will be volunteering when the landscaping project is decided. After the new.
Sure.
Some of us have said we'll put in some sweat equity for you for free.
Well, but I'd like to say that I have found, I said this at the beginning, I just want to repeat, that the great strength of UAH is the fact that very, very good people have been enticed to come here, and they have stayed. Some leave, but by and large, people have stayed. And in fact, in many cases, they have trained their successors, thinking of the staff. Mm-hmm. I think that's a wonderful thing. In the new environment, people take a job and leave after 2 years or something like that. And we have some of that. We have a few people that come here and do that. But mostly not. Mostly not. They come and they find that they can make continuing contributions. And I think that that's an extremely important attribute for a university to have.
Is there anything that you would like to, something you'd like to leave as part of this history that you'd like to say to the faculty, staff, students of UAH?
Oh, well, I think we've succeeded in making UAH a much more student-friendly university. I think that the students who come here, when I greet students or when I have greeted students and parents, I tell them that the students who come here pretty much self-select. They come because they want to join this university. I mentioned to them that if partying is their #1 priority, don't come. It could be #2 or #3, but if it's #1, don't come. And I think that's really a pretty good signature of the university, that the students who come here do want to be successful. They do want to have careers, whether that's in any of the disciplines that we offer. I'm proud of the fact that on average, the best students in Alabama come here with our average ACT score of 25. It's been the past decade, it's been between 24 and 25. It's very close again to 25. It's the highest of any state university in Alabama. I'm proud of the fact we have a very cosmopolitan student body. They come this fall. They will be from more than 70 other countries and almost every county of Alabama, and probably about 44 or 45 other states. They come here because of what we have to offer. I know President Williams shares the view that it's important to build the university further, and I fully support that. Senator Shelby would like it to be the MIT of the South, and that's fine with me too. We're trying to move that way. I don't think we'll ever go private, though. I think we won't do that. But I think that the magic of this has really been everybody working together: the faculty senate, student government, the administration, and the faculty at large, and the staff at large. And I'm sure that's going to continue. So I think UH is a great place, and it's going to get better.
Frank, thank you for being here, being part of this archival project. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for all the contributions you've made over your career here.
Thank you, sir.